Hello and welcome to this episode of the Online Therapy Podcast. And this is Renee McDonald, your host, and I've got Cath Knibbs back for another talk. We talked last time that I thought we'd be having Cath back because there was almost like a ... where there was a lot of things that we were talking about last time that I felt like it opened up another can of worms, and we are going to be talking about lots of cans of worms today. And which rabbit holes will we be going down? So I'm going to just hand it over to Cath in terms of how she feels the state of the world is in online therapy right now.
Yeah, one word would be discombobulated. So thanks for having me back, Renee. Yeah, there's a lot of panic, there's a lot of headless chickens, and there's a lot of don't know. In fact, I'll give you an example from a conversation I had this morning. There's a lot of consciously incompetent in terms of where people are currently at. Is now people are tending to recognise they didn't know what they didn't know, but now they know they didn't know it.
Yes. It reminds me of, the 4 stages of competence. I'm glad you brought that in, because I do talk to that as well in my work and training. Thank you for bringing that in. There's an additional thing there, I think, is, and I also talk to this too in my therapy practice, but the Johari window kind of style approach. I think people are blind to things that they don't know. So what do you think about that?
Absolutely. It's the same as well, I mean, even now, and we'll probably get onto this in terms of where we end up going with the conversation. This is what I spend a lot of time challenging at the moment, and whilst I'm coming across as probably I'm sure that people will see me as dictatorial, actually it's about saying to people, hang on a minute, did you know, have you considered, where are you getting this information from? Why have you taken that decision? And I'm talking, this is at membership body level, never mind about just the practitioners that I'm challenging as well. And it's to do with having lots of experience. So like yourself and I, we were talking about your background. My background is to be in and around cybersecurity. It's being in and around IT. It's being in and around frontline, sorry, not frontline, we call it first line through to third line support in terms of working with technology. And I've worked as a therapist with the deepest, darkest, the depravities of the impact of those crimes and the things when they do go wrong. So I've seen the preventative and I've seen the impact. So it's people don't know what they don't know, but they're kind of in that place where they're recognizing. And there's still a lot of ostrich syndrome happening at the moment with people putting their heads in the sand. And if you don't tell us, Cath, we don't have to deal with it. So it's we don't need to know that just yet.
And yet we're in this Corona COVID world now. And in Australia, we've certainly done the lockdown thing. And I know you have over in Britain as well. I've been following the news, but I'm just kind of wondering how that's playing into the hand of people just jumping into the space. What are your thoughts around that?
I think that what's happened, particularly in the UK, is many of the organisations jumped forward with a let's continue practice. It's imperative that practice trumps everything else, which and I dislike having to use that word trump there, but here we go. There is something about practice has suddenly trumped the rights and freedoms of people and the law that we have here in the UK, the GDPR, but there's also the Data Protection Act 2018, and it's understanding that these are not brand new laws. What has happened though is it's highlighted the deficit of knowledge for practitioners around data processing, what their legal obligations are, and most people are getting confused between guidelines from membership bodies, which are, if you like, best practice, versus those that are mandatory to protect the people that we are working with. So there's this kind of discord at the moment, people saying, well, X association hasn't told me I need to do that, so I don't need to know that, because, if we come push to shove, that's because X association didn't know that they needed to do it in the first instance.
Back to the competency stuff. You don't know what you don't know. Yeah, and until you work in such places and spaces, and I know, you know, I've worked on Dr. Julian and being an ACTO member and that kind of thing. I think it's just, it continues to open my eyes up to lots of things, including my conversations with you. That, though at the same time, you know, I think also I think I'm talking to personal stuff where I, prior to therapy, worked in media and IT and that kind of area within media and IT, that there's an understanding that some of us have, that some others who have just been therapists, or, you know, a lot of people might go be a mum and then go into therapy. It's the kind of stuff that people haven't had to be aware of up until now, and now they're freaking out. So what do people in that situation do?
I'm just thinking, actually, there's a real parallel with the other side of the world that I work in terms of the e-safety.
Yeah.
So actually, what I am coming across are, there's, you know, parents didn't know how to teach, you know, and I'm just thinking that in terms of where parents currently are in, and they didn't know very well, you know, maybe how to structure their time and to kind of get the household running efficiently. That's one way to put it. What I've noticed is the transition for children who are now doing homeschooling, that in the safety world, if you think the counselling world is difficult in terms of not knowing what they don't know, the online school, you know, homeschooling, there's a huge deficit of knowledge there, and this goes up to government level as well.
Oh yeah.
So in the e-safety world, there's a number of us that have regular meetings, and during these meetings, we're actually having conversations about, okay, so if this for example, there's a lot of laptops being sent out to children who are disadvantaged, so that's socioeconomically disadvantaged, and we don't actually know if those laptops were pre-prepared to go out to those children, or whether they've gone out with, you know, bloatware on, whether they've got good enough cybersecurity measures, whether they've got the right kind of programs on, whether there's filtering, and it's this whole cohort of people not being ready for a crisis in and around technology, which is, it doesn't make sense, but
but I'll put my hand up. I'm a mum and I've got kids at home because they're 14, 11 and 8. Like, you know, and I'm run off my feet doing this kind of work. And then, you know, they're having to be on computers, and, you know, some of the other computers in our house haven't been set up properly. So I feel like that is exactly where I'm at. And, and I feel like, you know, how do I even explain this? If you've had the conversations with your kids, if you've been able to talk to them about how to, you know, work through these issues themselves too, or have that, like, these are the kinds of conversations I've had over years with my kids as well. That there's an element of continual conversations and communication you've got to have with your children around these things as well.
Absolutely, and to be perfectly honest, it doesn't always give you. What I will do is I'll give you a personal example. It doesn't always help. So given the fact that I do what I do, and the knowledge that I have, and the conversations that I had with my children, actually one of my children did take on as a younger child. They're now both in their 20s, so this is going back quite some time. Took on a code from somebody on one of the consoles, and it resulted in his account being locked down, and I got an email from basically the console company to tell me that there'd been so basically it was like illegal behavior, and they'd taken a code which was going to allow them to circumnavigate certain things. And, you know, you can imagine my response, which, you know, wasn't very therapy based. It was definitely very mum. And, you know, given the fact that this is my world and this is my job, there was something about even having those conversations doesn't necessarily mean that our children will be protected, nor will the device. And it's about saying, okay, but as adults, we actually have much more capacity to take that into account and do something about it. And right now I'm seeing overload, and, you know, with the internet internet safety companies that I kind of write for in this country, there's conversations that are popping up on the TV screen. So I've noticed one of them said, you know, if you leave your children with if you leave them to their devices, with their devices, they're basically going to be stuck on their devices. And I kind of thought, wow, we're now driving another fear-mongering message.
Yeah.
You know, so that might drive us towards the screen time debate, which I disagree with. But we are seeing lots of people saying you need to learn all about the internet really rapidly, really quickly, and it's just not possible. It's really not. It's too much to learn for people in a particular fear state, as many people are, or now as we're getting into that bored, frustrated, and we're on the opposite side of the crescendo at the moment to the trauma and stress cycle.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that in, because I've seen this as collective trauma from the start, as soon as this was announced. And where are the associations talking about that?
Well, I must give UKCP a little bit of credit on this one. They have suddenly put together some emergency Covid-19 podcasts.
Yep.
So Sarah Niblock has been, so it's been the I think it's the vice chair, and Sarah Niblock, so she's the CEO.
Yep.
They've done a few conversations, one of which turned towards, you know, regulation, but there are conversations about people being in a collective lockdown, and therefore it's a collective state.
Yeah.
But in terms of trauma itself, I mean, I wrote this in a blog some time ago about, you know, we're the biggest cyber trauma by proxy that we all had was from the outset, where the news and media outlets bombarded us with, you know, lots of information, which was there for the right reasons. However, the speed and the flow of it was far too much for many of us to cope with. There were conflicting messages, there was a lot of fake news, and what that did is it added to that collective trauma. So not only did we have the trauma, we also had that added layer of, dare we even look at the television, because what were we going to be told now, and how frightening it was to see, you know, this news, and, you know, how difficult for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. I'm hearing you on so many levels. So, you know, because I find it really interesting that I'm watching people who aren't trained in therapy talking about collective trauma more than the therapists or the therapy associations, I guess, is what I'm sharing. And I just think it's just really, you know, it's really funny where there's just a lot of people jumping into this online therapy space, and we were talking about this off air, that it's the you know, jumping into this space has become a kind of a thing that people are doing, and then the associations are saying, well, they're kind of, you know, being reactive rather than proactive, or kind of reacting to all of these things coming in, and maybe putting up, you know, free training and free this and free that, and all you need to do is 10 steps to, you know, COVID or some kind of thing like that.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, as the associations were putting out advice that, in my opinion, and this is coming from a Privacy 4 perspective, in terms of the company that's been that was designed around. So, in fact, I'll go back a step and I will explain who Privacy 4 are. So, a number of years ago, knowing that the GDPR was coming and it was changing, I spent maybe 8, 9, 10 months going around teaching some therapists all about data protection and the steps they needed to take. And during that process, recognized that I was talking a different language. People were quite frightened by this new legislation and law that was coming in. So I went round basically all of my friends in the sectors of privacy, risk management, information security, cyber security, data protection, got them all together and said, look, this is what I want to do. So Privacy 4 came about, that what we designed was an industry standard. So I say we because there was a lot of people that were involved. And it's an industry standard that takes therapists through learning about cybersecurity, data protection, privacy laws. And, you know, there's more than 3 industries that we teach them over 3 months. But there's tips, there's things that they need to do lawfully, which are their own responsibility. And in doing so, I was kind of going up and down the country, and I noticed that people didn't understand this language, put it all together. And what actually happened was, as people became reactive from the organisations and took an approach that was very reactive, it was very much, you must provide services, you must continue to provide services because it's paramount to the mental health of people. From my perspective, I also bought into some of that drama, because I was then saying, hang on a moment. It was probably slightly more effy-jeffy than that, but it was, hang on a moment, you need to take certain steps, and those certain steps are paramount in terms of protecting you, providing a safe space online, and then protecting your client. Because I was making a comparison to during therapy training, we do not go and start working with our clients until we have achieved certain competencies right from the outset. And there was a rush to provide therapy online, and what I was hearing from a lot of concerned people was something along the lines of, but the children will need the therapy, or the people who are anxious will need therapy. And as I said, the whole world was on lockdown, so I'm aware that or going to be on lockdown, so that there is this anticipation about, yes, we are all going to stop face-to-face work for a short time, but there wasn't one single child who wouldn't have known why they were not going to school in those circumstances. Because let's take little Timmy, who should have been coming to see Cath on a Wednesday afternoon just after school, and lockdown happens, and you know, the social isolation. Timmy now doesn't go to school on the Monday or the Tuesday. It's unlikely that it was going to be in the repertoire of Timmy that he was going to be going and seeing Cath either, because at some point the family would have said, we are not allowed to go to school, or we have to stay in the house. So under those circumstances, the equivalent of a COBRA meeting could have happened with the organisations, and they could have said, okay, what do we need to do? And it felt very much like there were emergency meetings about what's the best that we can do, and that was then put out to the public. And I became reactive to the fact that, yes, we have to have this service, but we also have to provide that safe space, and that safe space is the most important thing about therapy, because a person has to feel safe enough in order to do the work.
Exactly. And I regularly talk to, trust is made and broken in the smallest of moments, like Brene Brown talks to. And in the online space, it's like that, where you can lose a client, and you know, where things get bumped off or bumped in. And I'm regularly talking to the trust kind of concept. So what do you reckon about that?
So I'll tell you what's happened since we last spoke. Is I've authored a journal article with 2 colleagues from New Zealand. And part and parcel of this journal article is I talked about in the corporeal world. If I provide a space for a client, and I'm just going to talk here as though you're now going to imagine for a moment that you come to my therapy business. There is a room. You come into that room, and you implicitly know, just by being a human being, that I have net curtains or blinds, and I can see that you have blinds behind you. That there is this trusting element of, I'm in a room, the door is shut there, and apart from potential, you know, listening devices, I'm in a safe space. And as a therapist, I'm able to co-regulate my client based on, if we hear somebody outside, or the postman knocks at the door, whatever's happening, I'm able to say to the client, can we just hold it there? Or the client will naturally slow down their speaking. They will turn towards the door to say, who is that? And there's all of these cues that in a corporeal setting, you have, you know, you've got your, let's go woo-woo for a moment. You've got your electromagnetic frequencies, you've got your neuroception, person to person.
Yep.
You've also got that knowingness, unconscious knowing, and where we connect with a client.
But
there's also the non-verbal cues. And not at any point do I feel like I don't know who's behind the screen. So, for example, the way we're talking at the moment, I can see that you're looking into your screen. I have no idea if there is somebody stood behind the other side of your screen.
Oh yeah, sure.
And for a client in this space, they are expecting, particularly in a distressed state, they are expecting us to be that expert, us to create the space, whether it be holding or deep therapeutic work. They expect us to do the same online as we do in the corporeal world.
I get it, and that's what I have always tried to create. And a lot of people, you know, so for example, you know, a lot of people have said to me, oh, so why do you have that, you know, in the background? Or why do they, you know, there's a lot of people who talk to me about stuff, but I actually am really thinking about my decor as well. And I don't like just having a white screen. Some people talk about having a white screen or you know, the green screen, because that creates an element from my perspective. If I'm a humanist, which I am, a humanist psychotherapist, and coming from that perspective, like a deep, you know, listening and Rogerian place first, then we're coming from a place of actually connecting human to human, not bot to bot, or you know, some kind of other stuff. So I really think about that. I've had a number of people say, oh yeah, why not a green screen? Or that to me means it's less real.
And there's so I am just going to say my online space, which is not the one that I'm currently in at the moment, is actually my podcasting office. Now, unfortunately, as I was texting you earlier on, we've had major outages of the internet today, so I've ended up having to relocate so I could hotspot in terms of being able to do this with you. So there's also something about the space that my clients, I actually and I've talked about this on the trauma informed video work today, actually. Clients will expect to see with me something that's very familiar that they would also see in my office. So one of the things I did do with all of my clients before we changed is I showed them my podcast screen and said, this is what I do, this is how I do my podcasts, this is the scene you will see. So before we went into lockdown, I actually had a conversation with my clients and you know, talked about the room that I will be in is a safe space, and here's where it is, and because I previous to COVID, I have a contract that transitions both online and offline. So it's one that says I will offer you a safe space, and that includes virtual as well as corporeal.
I have a similar kind of a contract, because I do about 50-50, but now I'm 100% online because of the situation. A lot of people still obviously like to see you face to face if they can. And I think you've just brought in something there. It's like that transitioning to this online space, but successfully doing so and talking to contracting. I'm big on that. In fact, I'm probably, you'll hear me bang on about things like contracting and how is this all, I have a colleague in the social media space, and I think this is right because he's a therapist. It's your own ecosystem. So he talks about it as your ecosystem, which effectively then people know if they have therapy with me, this is what it looks like, this is just how it goes, and they'll always see me here because this is my therapy office at home. So and supervisees who've come to my home, they know this is my space. So now that they've moved online too, some of them who've come here have then gone, I know where you are, you know, that kind of thing.
And for those that are in a distressed state, one of the things they will look for is familiarity. So it's really quite important to have something that, you know, is familiar to them. Now I'm aware that because a lot of people ended up in lockdown, that suddenly they're now bringing in what I actually called today the visual rush of those cues that are about somebody's bedroom and somebody's living room and somebody's kitchen and somebody's shed, and whatever it might be. But also there is this two-way unconscious checking out that happens between the client, the therapist. And for those people who are massively distressed, which right now that's quite a lot of people, it can leave them feeling more exposed than a client who is engaging in online therapy than outside of COVID as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's these huge cues to kind of pay attention to right now.
I agree, and that feeds into things like online disinhibition, and we probably need to bring that in too. I do Facebook Lives for my Facebook group, like, so I run a massive Facebook group, and then I do Facebook Lives, but they're not always here, and sometimes they might be, but they might be in my bedroom, but it's never where you can see things. It's more like, it just needs to be appropriate. Do things appropriately. Or, the other day I was out in my garden talking, but it's about how are you doing these things to come across not only professionally, but ethically and in such a way that it actually works, so that it's not inappropriate. It's you've fully clothed. And there was did you see the one with the social workers from America?
No, but being fully clothed has actually been in my contract and it used to make people laugh. So the first time I actually showed people my contract, and I said, I have a social media policy within it. I have this, and this. But it also says, because I work a lot with children and adolescents, we have conversations beforehand. And one of them is you'll remain fully clothed. You will throughout the therapy session remain fully clothed. And one adolescent went, really? And I said, absolutely. Whilst I know that pajamas might be a thing that you really want to wear in an evening or a morning or whatever, I'm not so sure that's really appropriate for me to be witnessing you in your pajamas, and at the end of the day, pajamas are very individual, let's just say. And working with adolescents, I do not want to be so I think there was one particular case where I was working with an adolescent. I called to set up the meeting, and literally the video went doo, and I looked and went, I'll call you back in a minute, doo, and just hung up. And the young person was like, well, why did you do that? And I said, because it looked like you were still in bed. Oh yeah, I was. I was clothed, and I said, okay, this is what we talked about. There's professionalism to what I'm doing, and there is absolutely no way on this planet I am going to talk to a young person while they're still sitting in their bed. I don't do it with my own children at the end of the day, because I'll kind of go, well, when you get out of bed or when you're up in, it's about that level of what would happen if there was a and this is just where I'm going to go into that cybersecurity realm just for a second here. What would happen if I know people are talking about Zoom bombing, but I'm going to talk about session hacking. Session hacking is what it's been called for a long time. Okay, Zoom bombing is the new word that replaces some of the session hacking. But what would happen if it was session hacked? What would happen if they took a screenshot? Young people do this all of the time in terms of what's amusing, funny, for the lols. And what would happen to me professionally if I hadn't contemplated taking that into account at that point in time? And it was just a really very quick reaction, actually, to suddenly go, that looks like bedclothes, boop, and be off. And know that it's just not appropriate for me to be having a conversation with an adolescent in that particular way.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Because what might that mean to the parents too?
Yeah, and if I think about, so I'm not sure you will actually get this experience that much, Renee, but when working with young people, it can be really fascinating, because quite often they take the call on a device, and they like to show you around the house or the garden, or
Yeah.
you know. So I've spent more time looking at ceilings over probably the last 6 or 7 weeks than I have done for a long time.
Yeah.
Floors,
Mm.
you know, doors, walls, where I'm not actually looking at the people.
Yeah.
It's such a fascinating medium to work with.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also these recognitions of, you know, how that space transitions. And
Mm-hmm.
even when you kind of have the contract that says, okay, we will sit together, we will have a conversation, it
Yeah.
will take place here, here and here, there's got to be that little bit of wiggle room.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
It's just fascinating. It's just fascinating. I love working online.
Yeah, I do too. Because it is fascinating, and people think have thought it might be easier, or just switch on Zoom or Skype or WhatsApp or whatever. There's a lot of people talking to that. Oh, WhatsApp is better now that Zoom bombing has happened. Yeah.
I can see where this is going. So yes, shall we talk security of platforms for a moment then, Renee? Shall we talk security and privacy? Okay.
Yes.
So obviously I'm talking from the UK perspective, and from a Privacy For perspective. So this is based on lots and lots of conversations I've had. In the UK, I am recommending to people that they do not use most of the apps that currently exist that are what are known as consumer grade products. So I'm going to give you a really nice metaphor here that I think your listeners will quite enjoy. Pretty much when we are driving a car, we have different levels of insurance, and those different levels of insurance for driving a car are for different reasons. So right now, people are using Zoom and other platforms. So whereby Skype, maybe Microsoft Teams, that are the equivalent of driving around with your domestic pleasure insurance that we have in this country. And yet, if I was working using my car to pick up clients or to drive between two business addresses, I would actually need business class insurance on my car. And for me, it's the same kind of metaphor in terms of using platforms online. So currently, what's happening within the UK is we have the law, which is the GDPR, and we also have privacy laws, which are part of the Data Protection 2018. So this is what we call protecting the rights and freedoms of those that we work with. And using digital technology means that we've got to have conversations with people about the technology that we're going to be using, and also our lawful obligations. And I'm going to keep emphasizing that it is lawful, because actually in the United Kingdom it is. And within the EU actually, because of GDPR, that we have a legal duty to say to people, okay, when you come to my office, I have CCTV at the front of the building. So that CCTV is going to film you. The only person who has access to that CCTV is me and, you know, maybe the business landlord or whatever the conditions might be. If at any time you want your film deleting off there, you know, we'll have to sort that out, because that's about privacy laws. And then when you come into the therapy room, everything that you say to me is confidential unless it's a safeguarding issue, and you're then talking about security and confidentiality. Now, if I was to say to somebody, and actually on my house I have or on my therapy practice I have this lock, which conforms to the BSI standard, you know, of so that's the British Standard Industry for locks. I have a Yale key, the other one is kept at such and such an address. You know, we give people information about their safety and security in a physical location. And what's currently happened with the sudden rush to move online is a lot of that information is either negated, omitted, naively forgotten about or not known about, or people just don't understand it. And currently what's happened is Zoom's had, you know, give it its due, it's had a bit of a kick in lately. And I've also talked about Zoom because up until the 23rd of March, I thought Zoom was a suitable platform to use for therapy.
Yeah. Isn't that
And
interesting?
yes, and
Yep.
this was based on reading the privacy policy,
Yep.
looking at what Zoom said they did with data, and
Yep.
then a colleague of mine actually came to, it was actually a group of us, and said, I've just spoken with Zoom, and there was this information that I needed about some form of meeting.
Yep.
Zoom came back and said, actually, we've got the name of the participant that was in the meeting with you, and it was on such and such a day at such and such a time. And at that point in time, I'd said, well, that sounds like it's okay if it's on their servers and they're not doing anything with that data, and as long as they're not accessing it, because if they do, there needs to be an audit trail of who's accessed whatever was going on.
Yep.
And then I went off to a privacy expert, and I kind of had a conversation, and I said, hang on a minute, if they're keeping that data, is it the video recordings? Lo and behold, during this whole process, the information, if you like, cascaded very quickly in Forbes magazine, in TechCrunch, in lots of big Business Insider magazines, if you like. And during that process, it came to light that Zoom didn't really have this audit trail. They were also collecting data about people using the platform, and that information was more than likely, is what I'll say, for fear of litigation, that data was being passed to ad tech companies. And those ad tech companies had been collecting that data about users, and then they were forwarding it on to insurance companies. And one of the things that this wasn't doing was protecting the rights and freedoms of the users. Now, Zoom is a US-based company.
Yep.
So in the United Kingdom, we have the GDPR, and in the US, they have very different laws about what they do with data and personal information and personally identifiable information, which are different things. What came to light was Zoom had been collecting information. They were also passing information about the clients to companies like LinkedIn. They were passing it to Facebook. And Facebook were then collecting that data on those users with and without their consent, by using, for example, whether you took it on an iPhone, an iPad, or a desktop. And then it further transpired that not only were they having privacy issues, because this is what this relates to, this is about the data of a person, and then it turned out that they had security issues. And lo and behold, because people can commit crime online, in terms of cybercrime, and people were then deciding to do malicious session hacking. And the session hacking exploited more and more of Zoom's issues and features. And then lo and behold, the third blow was they were then keeping some of the data, and rather than keeping it on their servers, it was also then going to Amazon servers. So there was a lot of cybersecurity sector and info sector investigations that found lots and lots of issues with the platform Zoom. In the meantime, as the director of Privacy4, I went off and I went, okay, what are the platforms I have ever used in the past? And I have used a service called Whereby, which used to be called Appear In. And I went off to find that they also collect metadata. So that one was binned. I then went off to find, and essentially I literally went through every single platform and found that many of them have been designed for chit-chatting, calling your family, and a bit of business work. And that realistically, these platforms were not designed with something called privacy by design or privacy by default. So Privacy4 has been recommending that essentially these platforms are not to be used for therapy within the UK, following EU and UK GDPR laws. It's resulted in a number of therapists getting quite angry with me. I'd blogged about this. I've had phone calls, emails, text messages, and conversations with membership bodies. I've confused a lot of people because I apparently brought quite a scary story to the front. And one of the things I've seen as a consequence are people using platforms like WhatsApp
Yep. Yep.
And there's also another area of concern, which are when you use these platforms, for example, and I don't know how many people know this, but Zoom have a policy that under 16 years of age, you cannot have an account with Zoom. Therefore, in the laws of the GDPR, but also if you look at the UN Convention Rights of the Child and laws around the eye rights of a child, we should not be using platforms where the age limit or the age range for using certain platforms contravenes what we're actually doing. So right now in the UK, there are so many laws, so many different things that are currently being broken, stamped on in the rush to provide a service to these people. Without a consideration that later on, some of these people who have used these platforms have an absolute human right to now say, you didn't protect my data, or during the process, I've now suddenly found that an insurance company won't give me insurance because I used a platform with you and you didn't tell me about all of the issues to do with the platform. And I think we're going to be in a bit of a sticky mess as this unfolds and as we move forward over the next few years.
Okay, that's a big mouthful and a lot of info. Well, I have a final question, because it kind of moves out of that and into something that's happening in Australia. And we do have privacy laws here, and we do have the OAIC data breach legislation that came in. Nothing like the GDPR. It's like it's more like the HIPAA type of scenario, but then there's a lot of people that breach it because telehealth says it's okay to Skype. So then what's WhatsApp then? Who cares? You know, that kind of thing. And so this is kind of why I'm like, well, Zoom bombing, that's nothing compared to, you know, but anyway, so we can go down that track. But anyway, in the regards to, I guess, what's happening in Australia, that some of the tech companies are literally advising government, and they're on governmental panels around privacy laws and what have you. My perspective on that is that's a massive conflict of interest. But the problem is the government doesn't know what they don't know either. And so here's the issue, is that I've been advised that Zoom doesn't comply with Australian privacy laws, but nobody can tell me where. But that all these other companies that might comply, it's like, it's similar on some levels, more like consumer grade, but yet just made for therapists. But I don't know what they're doing with that. So this is kind of part of parcel of what the issue is. And then a number of them are going into AI, and what does that mean if I put my data with that, and how is that going to be used? You kind of follow? So I guess I'm just putting that out there as some information around Australian stuff. So where do you see that might fit into the general cyber decision making or online decision making that therapists need to make?
Well, I mean, big data, and I've noticed this is the difference between Australia and England, isn't it? Is there's data and data. So the data I mean, we have been we have been consumers, but we've also been the products of big data collection for a long time. For those of us who you know, Amazon, Netflix, and one of the things I actually said during one of my interviews was, if you think that it's just Zoom that's collecting data on you, go and watch Netflix and see how long it is before you get a recommendation, because actually this is where those machine learning algorithms are currently in practice. There is. And I'm really, this is where it's a dichotomy for me sometimes. I'm really fascinated, and I am so looking forward to, as technology increases, that some of my shopping habits may well be more tailored to what I'm looking for, and save me quite a bit of time, actually. So there's probably something selfish in there anyway. But in terms of the personalised shopping experience, the personalised healthcare, I think it's a really fantastic way to go. Now, the only way we can get there is if that data is harvested and then used by the AI and the machine learning, so that it can then kind of produce that for each and every one of us. My concern is when the data is used for reasons other than those personalized, you know, so it's, I'll give you a really good example. I have had my DNA sequenced. Okay.
Yep.
Now, not to the nth degree where I'm going CRISPR and doing all of the gene editing, but something called nutrigenetic testing.
Yeah.
So this was to find out what are called single nucleotide polymorphisms. So without getting too technical, it's about where the epigenetic changes are on some of my DNA readout pathways, so that I can make changes to better my health. So this is very personalized to me. It's not based on this particular diet, it's actually based on my genetics. Now, the company that I went with, I went and had a look at their data policy. I took it very seriously. What do they do with it? And they take the swab, they sequence the data, and within 3 months, everything is destroyed. Once that data has been sent to you, they then don't own that data anymore. I do.
Okay.
Now, had I have gone with a company such as 23andMe, most people might have, well, I don't know most people, some people might have heard that 23andMe sold some of that data to insurance companies, to research companies.
Yep.
And I got into a bit of a spat with somebody on Twitter, because they were saying, well, it's data. And I said, yes, but it's about the SNPs. It's not about the person. So it was information that didn't identify anybody in a particular way. It was the kind of data you would get from a research project. 9 out of 10 people said that they liked Marmite. And, 4 out of 5 people said they liked Pepsi better than cola. It was that kind of level of information that was shared. But most people didn't read the privacy policy of 23andMe to see that they could be in that level of data collection, which I think might bring us on to where we're about to go. So I wear something called an Aura Ring, and an Aura Ring tracks my heart rate variability, my sleep score, my body temperature. And when COVID began, there was a little add-on to the app, and it said, basically, we'd like to track people who, their body temperatures. We'd like to have a look to see if we can provide evidence towards understanding COVID. So, of course, being the person that I am, I clicked on where's the privacy policy? What is it that you're going to do with the data? And I wasn't happy with the data protection policy that they came back with, the privacy policy, because what they basically said is we cannot guarantee that we won't pass on the details of you as a person, you as the ring holder, you as the. So I just went, not happening, and deleted it off the app, only to find that a number of people are like, oh, I'm taking part in this research, aren't I a good citizen? And I said, you've got no way of controlling your data. And this is where I think we're going at the moment, in terms of when we are going to be delivering services online, and the way that this will enhance. I've even done a blog on this. We're going to get to a point where we're putting glasses on. We're not going to be sitting in front of screens. We're going a bit like Second Life. We are going to be in Avatar land. And clients are going to be able to pick the color of the therapy wallpaper. There's going to be so much choice, and it's going to be very personalized to each individual client that we meet, that there's something about, and we will need to know what it is that's being collected about us, about our clients, and how we can convey that. Now, given the current state of affairs with COVID-19 and the lack of knowledge about online therapy and what that actually brings up, I think the way that technology is increasing is far faster than many people can actually study, read around, understand. And I think that's the bit that worries me as the therapist, saying, we're already here in 2020, Renee, me, you, quite a lot of people at ACTO who have done training, and the rest of the world needs to catch us up. And actually, we need to be catching up technology.
Well, I'm watching things, and I'm not always liking what I see though. So this is the other thing about transitioning, and it's going to be important that we all can do this, but at the same time, you know, be mindful of what's really going on too. There was a real life job ad for an engineer that building robots built and designed for war. This is not a joke, in Australia. Okay, so this stuff is getting like robot wars, iRobot level kind of stuff. And so there's some things that we aren't talking to the ethics enough. We aren't talking to the, you know, so from my perspective as well, there's also the flip side of that I'm not sure if you want to go down, but I was hearing what you were saying around we'll put on glasses and this and that. There's the humanist side of me that says, not so sure about that.
Yeah. So people, rather than me go off on another tangent and rant, I think that people could listen to Douglas Rushkoff, Sam Harris, listen to a bit of Peter Diamandis, because whilst he's also pro, there is the ethics. There's also David Ryan Polgar, so he's the tech ethist. There's Tristan Harris, and there's a lot of people within the area who are currently looking at what we need to do, and you know, this idea of human and machine is currently where we're at. I think it might soon be human with machine, and then it will be, you know, and that's where we're heading.
See, that sounds like Elysium too much for me, you know, like that, do you know? And then when we switch people on and off, that's then lacking and limiting people's choice and sovereign rights to being.
Well, I am going to say something controversial now, because this is exactly what David Icke was saying on that interview that he did not so long ago about actually he thinks that people will be I'm trying to think what word would do it, but he thinks that people will become cybernetically connected to AI, and that actually that's how, you know, as he would say, the elite would then control the human race. And you know, these are real risks. And I think, you know, we do move fast with technology. I don't think we're always looking, well, I know so, because look at Facebook, okay? Facebook was set up in terms of a social connecting platform, but actually what it didn't look at was the impact on the people that would use it, and how it could be used to manipulate. And then obviously we know that data was collected because we had the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Exactly. And then, you know, goes back to my original conversation offline, the road to hell can be paved with good intentions.
And it usually is. It usually is.
And then not everyone who says hold your reins or hold your horse is a bit like you with the data protection stuff, and cyber trauma, and also, you know, talking about Zoom and all the rest of it. It's actually really important to have a potential opposing viewpoint, but also then working out where's the middle ground here, and should we all become cyborgs or not? Personally, I'm not so sure, based on a lot of the things I've been through personally, and so I think we need to really be aware of where this is bringing us down, and we need to keep talking about this, I think.
My concern is always and I say is always mainly aimed at the adolescents and children that I work with, because what I get to do now as an adult has an impact on me and myself going forward. And I'm fully aware that technology is not going to increase that much before I advance and mature enough in terms of the length of life I have left in technology. I tend to be looking, saying, hang on a minute, these children that are 5 and 9 and 14, they still have the rest of their life with advancing technology. And I think at the moment we're making decisions on behalf of them. And I'm trying to remember who did the proverb that we actually borrow the earth from our children. So in the same way, we're doing it with technology. And I think my personal opinion is we get very excited about technology, myself included. You know, so VR came out, I was onto VR, I was using VR with clients and looking at the ethics and there's also something about, I think sometimes we get a little bit giddy, we get a bit ahead of ourselves, and we don't look at the long-term implications because, again, we don't know what we don't know.
Yep, exactly. And that even is a bit of a circle back to our original conversation around competence versus unconscious incompetence and the like. We're going to have to leave it there. We've had a massive conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on and for your valuable time and for giving up your time for this, because this will be going out today. That's my plan. So this will be,
wow.
I managed to often have a quick turnaround for these, and I really want to send it out today.
Well, that's good. I'll barricade my door from, you know, the Zoom Luddites that are going to come after me now in terms of, you know, you're upsetting my practice, Cath, and, you know, stuff.
At the end of the day, it's about informed consent and privacy and just informing ourselves as well. And I think that's what it's all about. And then making an informed decision accordingly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and having the morals and ethics to justify. I mean, for me, this is why I say to people. So I think I've seen on social media quite a lot. Yeah, but I just want to use a free platform, and I've said, okay, if that's where your ethics and values are, please make sure you tell your client that's where your values and ethics are. Because you're probably going to find that you know, clients don't always rock up to your door if you say, actually, I'm not really bothered about this, and that. You know, so for example, I use a room without a locked door at the start of a corridor, and lots of people can walk past and hear our conversation. That's all right with you, isn't it? Because it's cheap rent, you know, versus actually, I'm going to have the room at the end of the corridor with a lock that's got window, very safe. Yeah. Which one would you like as the client?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. We could keep this conversation.
We could.
No, it's all good.
Stop talking, Cath.
I love talking to Cath. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you so much for your time, because this has been awesome. And I hope the listeners are going to be able to listen to this in full. So my plan is to put this out also through YouTube, so you'll be getting that too. And we will have to probably see you again, Cath. Like I'll have you back on for sure.
Well, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed, you know, my mini rant, my expose of my opinions. But actually, this is something I take really, really seriously. So it's
I can see that, but so do I. And we all have to kind of come to our own conclusions as well, which is important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks heaps, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.